You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, it's May the 23rd, and from the Legacy420.com news desk, you're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News here at paceradio.net. Good morning, Glenn. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Al. It's nice warm here now.
Yeah,
I like it.
Well, I can tell you, yesterday it was 31 degrees Celsius here, so it's coming your way, man.
I didn't check what it was, but I was sweating the entire day. It was really hot here yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm not used to that 41-degree Costa Rica weather anymore.
No. You do unfortunately lose that when you're not there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, bike update. Did you last Thursday you weren't here. You came here to Ontario and you picked up your new motorcycle?
I did. Absolutely love it. It's a giant compared to my old one. It's not any faster or anything like that. It's just like riding your couch now.
Sure, exactly.
I have a nice Harley Davidson Ultra Classic Limited.
Nice.
Very nice bike with 16,000 miles on it.
Wow. So, like you said, you're not worried about being built for speed. You're built for comfort.
That's what it is. It's like riding your couch. You know, it's got a little more rumble than my couch does, but other than that, same thing.
That's good. That's good. Well, I'm glad you got yourself a motorcycle again and you're back riding. And I'm sure you're looking forward to the rest of the summer out on. It
was a pretty easy 2 weeks because most of the weather here was crap during that 2 weeks, and when I got back, it turned beautiful. So it's a sign from God, I think.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect weather. All right, time for us to get on with the news. First story of the day. Headline comes to us from the Associated Press. Daily marijuana use outpaces daily drinking in the U.S. And they say this is a new study.
For the first time, the number of Americans who use cannabis just about every day has surpassed the number who drink that often. A shift some 40 years in the making as recreational cannabis use became more mainstream and legal in nearly half of U.S. states. In 2022, an estimated 17.7 million people reported using cannabis daily or near daily, compared to 14.7 million daily or near daily drinkers, according to an analysis of national survey data. In 1992, when daily cannabis use hit a low point, less than 1 million people said they used cannabis nearly every day.
Alcohol is still more widely used, but 2022 was the first time this intensive level of cannabis use overtook daily and nearly daily drinking, says the study's author Jonathan Calkins, a cannabis policy researcher at Carnegie Mellon University. He says a good 40% of current cannabis users are using it daily or nearly daily, a pattern that is more associated with tobacco use than typical alcohol use.
The research, based on data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, was published Wednesday in the journal Addiction. The survey is a highly regarded source of self-reported estimates of tobacco, alcohol, and drug use in the United States. From 92 to 2022, the per capita rate of reporting daily or near daily cannabis use increased 15-fold. Calkins acknowledged in the study that people may be more willing to report cannabis use as a public acceptance grows, which could boost the increase. He's probably right there.
Oh yeah, because now it's no longer illegal, right? So yeah. Most states now allow medical or recreational cannabis, though it remains illegal at the federal level. In November, Florida voters will decide on a constitutional amendment allowing recreational cannabis, and the federal government is moving to reclassify cannabis as a less dangerous drug. Research shows that high-frequency users are more likely to become addicted to cannabis, says David Gorlick, a psychiatry professor of University of Maryland School of Medicine, who was not involved in the study. From my understanding, about 9% of the people who use cannabis, they say, can lead to some part of addiction.
The number of daily users suggests that more people are at risk for developing problematic cannabis use or addiction, Gorlick said. High-frequency use also increases the risk of developing cannabis-associated psychosis, a severe condition where a person loses touch with reality, he said. That's it.
That's it. Well,
That's it. He wasn't involved with the study.
I wasn't involved in the study. And I think it's a good thing to see people switching from alcohol over to cannabis.
I think I have seen what happens, and I have been a member of what happens with alcohol in my youth. And there's a comparison between the two. I see kind people doing nice things mostly on cannabis. I see drunk people doing mostly bad things on alcohol. It's not exclusive, but that's my observations.
Oh yeah, and moderation. Nothing wrong with sitting around having a social drink.
Yeah, and I mean when it's 30 degrees outside, I have no problem sitting out and having a Corona. It's really good, but that would be my limit, and I that might be once or twice a month. So in the summer, in the winter, I might not drink for 6 months.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. It's sort of like, why have a hot drink in the middle of summer?
Yeah.
But people, all kinds of people drink coffee.
And I also, I'm a coffee drinker too. That's mostly my beverage of choice is coffee, coffee or iced tea. Anyway, I forgot my point of that. I'm sorry.
All right, that happens. That happens. All right, we'll get on to the next story, and this one comes to us from the Chicago Sun-Times. It says, "Smoke and mirrors. Marijuana rescheduling won't accomplish much."
For half a century, critics have argued cannabis does not belong in Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act, a category supposedly reserved for drugs that cannot be used safely, even under a doctor's supervision, due to their high potential for abuse and lack of accepted medical applications. Last week, the U.S. Department of Justice finally agreed, implicitly admitting that the federal government has been lying about cannabis for decades, which 90% of everybody already knew, including the government themselves. This is monumental, President Joe Biden declared. This is true insofar as monuments look impressive, but otherwise do not accomplish much.
Biden is trying to motivate younger voters whose turnout could be crucial to his re-election, but those voters overwhelmingly favor cannabis legalization, and the DOJ proposal falls far short of accomplishing that. Yes, the proposed rule, which will be subject to 60 days of public comment before it is finalized, we'll have more on that later, would move cannabis to Schedule 3, which includes prescription drugs such as ketamine, Tylenol with codeine, and anabolic steroids. But that does not mean cannabis will be legally available as a medicine, which would require regulatory approval of specific cannabis-based products.
With cannabis in Schedule 3, state-licensed cannabis suppliers will remain criminal enterprises under federal law, albeit subject to less severe penalties, and I bet you they pay taxes. Although an annually renewed congressional spending rider bars the DOJ from interfering with the state medical cannabis programs, prosecutorial discretion is the only protection for businesses that serve recreational consumers. The federally illegal status of state-approved cannabis businesses discourages financial institutions from serving them, since doing so would invite potentially devastating criminal, civil, and regulatory consequences. Moving cannabis to Schedule 3 will not solve that problem either. But there is a safe banking act they're trying to pass too.
which has passed, actually, I think it's eight times now. It was used to be called Safe Banking Act before then. Biden portrays rescheduling as an important move towards reversing long-standing inequities caused by the federal government's failed approach to cannabis. but it will not decriminalize the use of cannabis, as he promised to do during his 2020 presidential campaign. Simple possession, even for medical purposes, will remain a federal offense punishable by a maximum $1,000 fine and up to a year in jail.
Although
Although
sorry.
Biden decries the needless barriers to housing, employment, and educational opportunities created by cannabis convictions, rescheduling will not eliminate those, nor do his pardons for people convicted of simple possession under federal law. Although Biden claims he is expunging thousands of convictions, that is not true, because presidential pardons do not expunge criminal records.
True. Rescheduling, even combined with clemency, also does not lift the various legal disabilities associated with cannabis convictions, cannabis consumption, or participation in the cannabis industry. Those include loss of Second Amendment rights, a policy that Biden defends, and ineligibility for admission, legal residence, and citizenship under immigration law. What does rescheduling accomplish? In practical terms, the two main benefits of moving cannabis to Schedule 3 are fewer regulatory barriers to medical research and a financial boon to state licensed cannabis suppliers, who will no longer be barred from deducting standard business expenses when they file their federal tax returns.
Correct. That's the 280E form or something like that I keep reading about. They say that is not nothing. Abandoning the pretense that cannabis meets the criteria of Schedule 1 also represents progress of a sort. The reversal, however, comes at a time when 38 states have legalized the medical use of cannabis. 24 have taken the further step of legalizing recreational use, and 7 out of 10 Americans oppose cannabis prohibition. In this context, admitting what most of us already know is pitifully inadequate concession. Rescheduling and clemency fail to address today's central cannabis issue, the conflict between a federal government that is maintaining a scientifically dubious, morally bankrupt policy and states that have decisively rejected it. And Biden, despite his pose as a longtime drug warrior who has seen the error of his ways, is part of that problem.
The president, citing old-timey gateway drug concerns, has steadfastly resisted attempts to resolve this conflict by repealing the federal ban on cannabis, even while condemning the injustice inflicted by a failed approach to cannabis. He is sticking with it. He is of the older generation, and I do believe that there is no way he would get it taken off the schedule, period, with the Congress that we have now in the States.
Oh, yeah. It would have to be some type of executive order I
think this is the only way they can move it forward with the U.S. government as it stands.
Well, let's hope that I would think if one party talks of cannabis legalization, that the other will.
I have heard many Republicans speak out in favor of cannabis, but the vast majority are totally against it.
Yeah. Well, I know right now, according to the news, that there's a COA, which is a cannabis legalization that was put forward by 3 senators, Cory Booker and I can't remember the other guys, other 2 fellows' names, but I can think of I can picture him. I just can't pronounce his name right and get it out. But they are put something forward for the cannabis legalization. And as you mentioned during the story, the Safer Bank Act is there, right?
Yeah.
Still, so really, the two requirements of laws are there.
Yeah.
But they have to go through the system, and way Congress is right now, that's unlikely to happen. So.
Yeah, it won't.
Yeah, because the Banking Act has been going through the system for years, and the COA version, I believe this is the second time through.
And it's all going to change again if it doesn't get completely passed by November anyway. So we're going to find out what happens then.
That's why I said it'd be nice to see at least one of them bringing up as part of their platform, because then I would think that the other one will.
Yeah,
But
I
we'll
think
see what
so.
happens.
But I know the stance one side's taken on it, at least the leader of that one side. So
Yeah. Well, they've both been in power had 4 years. Biden's not quite done his 4 years yet, and neither one of them has done it. So
no.
doesn't look good. All righty, on to the next story. This comes to us from CNN. Cannabis poisonings among older adults have tripled, a study finds.
One may think young people are the main group enjoying the freedom of legalized cannabis. But in Canada, the greatest increase in users after legalization was among older adults. And sometimes it's sending them to the hospital, according to new research. The rate of emergency department visits for cannabis poisoning in older adults during this period of legalization of dried cannabis flower and edibles, October 2018 through December 2022, in Canada was significantly higher than the pre-legalization period, according to a research letter published Monday in the journal JAMA International Medicine. And I have to say, of course, it's legal. There's a lot more people using it. Of course, that's going to happen.
Yeah. And there's that learning curve, that learning experience, learning about edibles, knowing your milligrammage, all that stuff.
Yep.
It's going to happen. Unfortunately, they call it poisoning. I like to say overconsumed, not poisoned, because
for sure.
Yeah, like when someone gets drunk, do they call them poisoned? No.
I was going to say a smart ass comment there, but I'll go back.
Okay. Edibles, which include baked goods, candies, and beverages, are increasingly popular, said lead research author Nathan Stahl, a geriatrician and clinician scientist at Sinai Hospital in Ontario. But some older adults may be unaware of the strength of today's cannabis, and as little is known about the health effects of legalizing edible cannabis on older adults, the age group with the largest growth in overall cannabis use a year after dried cannabis flower was legalized in Canada, Stahl says. So there you go. The largest increased group is seniors in Canada.
Yeah. And there's an age-related bias, and many healthcare practitioners and frankly society hold that older adults are not using drugs. And that's not true, Stahl said. We find that the largest increase in emergency department visits of cannabis poisoning among seniors occurred after edible cannabis became legal for retail sale in January 2020. And I will put forward this. Probably most of these are people who consumed, say they ate one cookie or one whatever had the cannabis in it, and they didn't wait long enough to find out if they were going to be affected by it and decided to eat another one. And then they had too much in their system by the time the first one kicked in. So I know that happens.
Yeah.
The authors used the Ontario Ministry of Health's administrative data to examine the rates of emergency room visits for cannabis poisoning among older adults during the pre-legalization period, January 2015 to September 2018, and the two legalization periods, October 2018 through December 2019, which permitted the sale of dried cannabis flower only, and January 2020 through December 2022, which marked the legalization of cannabis edibles.
I'd like to see them do another study 5 years down to see I bet you those numbers would drop.
For sure.
Other people. So when people have cannabis poisoning, according to Stahl, they may experience confusion, psychosis, including hallucinations, anxiety or panic attacks, rapid heartbeat, chest pain, nausea, and vomiting. During the 8-year study period, there were 2,322 emergency department visits for cannabis poisoning in older adults who were age 69 on average. Nearly 17% of those adults were simultaneously intoxicated with alcohol. About 38% had cancer, 6.5% had dementia. Compared with pre-legalization, legalization period number 1 saw a twice higher rate of emergency department visits for cannabis overconsumption. I just don't like that word, poisoning. The rate during the second legalization period tripled of the pre-legalization.
This study provides a cautionary tale of legalization of substances without adequate research, education, and counseling of users regarding adverse effect and safe usage, particularly in older adults. Dr. Lona Moody and Dr. Sharon K. Inouye, who weren't involved in research, in a commentary on the research. Modi is the Amanda Stanford Hickey Professor of Internal Medicine at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and Inouye is director of the Aging Brain Center in the Kinda Arthur Marcus Institute for Aging Research in Boston, a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School.
Yeah, I know. Are they being told, start low,
Well,
all that stuff?
there is a problem, especially like in Ontario. They're not allowed to tell you anything. They're legally not allowed to tell you anything. They can't say, do this, do that. That's illegal. They can't do it. They can only sell you the product.
Now, they say when it comes to explaining the higher rates, both unintentional and intentional use of edible cannabis are worth discussing, experts said. Edible cannabis products may be particularly dangerous because they are often indistinguishable from non-cannabis containing foods and may contain high amounts of THC. Now, they say, I guess if you're consuming something that was made of distillate, you're not going to taste it. But if you made something that's made with the good old green butter, you're going to know.
Oh yeah. And they're saying indistinguishable. The packaging regulations we have makes them very distinct.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what the regulations are in Ontario, but here there's no bloody way you can mistake that
I know.
for anything but cannabis or THC product.
Yeah. Now, in his own practice, Stahl has seen a common scenario resulting from the lack of distinction. He says an emergency department doctor is not able to figure out why an older adult patient is neurologically impaired via any typical test, only for toxicology screening to come back positive for cannabis, much to the patient's surprise.
The other thing is that that's another thing. This screening for cannabis doesn't tell you that the guy used cannabis that day, right? It tells you the guy used cannabis in the past sometime. So I don't know what that's.
Well, they can measure the amount of nanograms in your blood. So they're like, obviously, I know the driving one is only 5, but if somebody's got something that's really high, obviously they've got a high amount of cannabis in them. Yeah, they got a lot of their nanogram limits are high, numbers are high. So
the other thing is that cannabis today is very different than cannabis was recently as the 90s and the mid 80s. Shaw explained. Today's cannabis extracts contain as much as 30 times more THC. Older adults who may not have used cannabis in decades are now trying again in this post-legalization era, may not be aware of that. Additionally, age-related changes in organ function and how the drug is distributed throughout the body, as well as having health conditions or being on prescription drugs, especially psychoactive ones, can make it easier for an older adult to experience cannabis overindulgence, Stahl added.
Yeah, I can see that because I know the first time I did dabs, like holy smokes.
Yeah. And I mean that's coming from two people who have a lot of experience using cannabis.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that experience, of course, today's high THC edibles are going to get you unless you're careful.
Just someone grabbing a vape pen. Because they're thinking that, okay, I'm going to vaporize with this concentrate. I'm not smoking a plant material, so on and so forth. And then find out that, holy smokes, this kicks my ass, right?
Yeah, it's way more concentrated than just smoking a joint.
Yeah, exactly. Some people who intentionally consume cannabis edibles may not be aware of this form has been more delayed than the fact of an inhalant, someone smoking, which goes straight to the bloodstream. He said, thinking the edible isn't working, they take another one too soon and end up getting more than they bargained for, which is exactly what you said earlier. Yeah.
And they're also not used to the strength, so even the first one could kick their butt. If they take the second one before it kicks in, that's when they're appearing in the hospital.
Yeah.
These are also people whose prescription medications for pain management, insomnia, and dementia symptoms aren't effective. So they consume edibles for the therapeutic purpose without consulting a doctor first, Stahl said. And most doctors can't tell you anything about it. They know basically nothing. Abstaining from cannabis use may be appropriate for some individuals, but I would be hesitant to give a blanket recommendation that no other adults should be using this, because there are people who are going to use it, even if that recommendation is given, Stahl said.
Yeah, exactly. Therefore, preventing cannabis-related harms in older adults requires a multi-pronged approach, he added, including storing cannabis in a locked location and in a clearly identified packaging. Products older adults intentionally use should have dosing information with specific guidelines for older adults, recognizing that the amount of cannabis that they may need is a lot less than younger populations, as Stahl says. And he goes on to say that in geriatric medicine, we have a mantra: start low and go slow. The same mantra applies here. Exactly.
Yeah. The amount at which cannabis can be poisonous can depend on multiple personal factors. It can't be poisonous, but some studies have indicated people should wait at least 3 hours before taking a second dose, Stahl said. Healthcare providers should also open and judgment-free conversations with older adults about cannabis use and its benefits and risks, he added. If they knew what their risks were and their benefits were, I could see them having that conversation, but they're not trained. They're no more trained than we are for cannabis questions.
Yeah, and our training is all through experience.
Yep.
So,
but, I'm not giving anybody medical advice. I'm just saying go slow, like they said.
Go slow.
Go slow.
Go slow. Yeah, don't eat the whole cookie.
Yeah, don't eat the whole cookie.
We tell people wait an hour because it takes time for it to go through your digestive system. I see he suggested 3 hours. But yeah, we always suggested at least waiting an hour before you got into that second bite. Never mind the second cookie.
that can be your downfall. The second cookie can be your downfall.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And he mentions that in the article. So, all right, on to the next story. This comes to us from the Green Market Report. Headline says Veteran Affairs preps for potential FDA approval of MDMA.
A planning document focused on preparing to quickly deploy psychedelics for treating PTSD has reportedly been circulated in the VA. That's Veterans Affairs. The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is preparing a strategy to deploy psychedelic treatments for mental health disorders if such therapies receive approval from the FDA, according to a document reviewed by the outlet.
According to the report in the Intercept document, the responsibilities of the Psychedelics and Integrated Project team has been circulated within the VA. However, the agency declined to comment on the topic. The document reportedly includes regular tasks for the team, such as advising the VA under Secretary of Health Sheriff Eleanor and providing strategic direction for the deployment of psychedelic medicine for mental health treatment in the Veteran Health Administration.
This news comes in advance of an FDA advisory committee scheduled for June 4th that includes a public hearing regarding the potential approval of MDMA-assisted therapy for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Green Market Report previously wrote in a federal notice, the FDA said the Pharmacologic Drug Advisory Committee will discuss the overall benefit, risk profile, and potential public health impact of Lykos Therapeutics' application for MDMA capsules on June 4th. The committee provides non-binding recommendations to the agency.
The Veterans Health Administration is the largest integrated healthcare system in the U.S. with more than 150 medical centers, and one of its current focuses is treating veterans suffering with drug-resistant depression and PTSD. In January, the VA announced it had issued a request for applications for proposals from its network of VA researchers to study the use of certain psychedelic compounds in treating PTSD and depression, including MDMA.
I would say this also should work very well for police and fire who suffer from the same kind of PTSD.
Correct. Yep.
The Intercept wrote that on May 10th, Elena Hall spoke to the Horizon Psychedelic Conference in New York. saying there was an unstoppable narrative in support of legalizing psychedelic medicine. The VA must be prepared for the overwhelming demand upon the approval of MDMA-assisted therapy, which could come as soon as August, Ellen Hall said in a report by the outlet.
The reason I'm here is that the data and the results of stories that I have heard from the veterans who have gone through these studies, these therapies speak for themselves, Ellen Hall said. The evidence-based therapies that we have, while they help, pale in comparison if we are able to replicate the scale in the preliminary results we have seen in psychedelics, especially MDMA for PTSD and increasingly psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression.
While MDMA is also known as ecstasy, has been popular nightclub recreational drug, administering the drug under more formal procedure requires planning. Patients would receive a controlled dose that could last for hours, and the process requires professional supervision. This would require a physical space to accommodate long treatments and professionals to oversee the treatments. This is why the VA is trying to prepare in advance to have the infrastructure ready to go if patient demand is strong. When patient demand is strong, I should have said.
Yeah. The FDA has noted that MDMA capsules have not been approved by any regulatory agency. Also, the safety and efficacy of the medicine have not yet been established for the treatment of PTSD. But it's good to see that they are planning for this to go through. Like, it hasn't been approved, but they're getting that infrastructure that's required, to be done when it's approved, so they can, it'll be on the ground running almost when it's done, instead of approving it and then having to build all that infrastructure and taking, like 2 years for it to be done. Right? That's
like most of the states when they legalize cannabis. It's the same thing. It takes years before it actually works properly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I see it's past the bottom of the hour. Time for us to take a break. Commercial time. Time to hear from those who help us inform our viewers. Watching Psychedelics and Cannabis educational news found here at paceradio.net.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor. If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from, the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and in the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tynanega.
We have 2 lines of drinks. One is called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with. And then we also have a line under the Red E brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
We are back, and we are live, and you're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. Well, Glenn, you ready?
I'm ready.
You're ready? Okay. Next up, this comes to us from the Cannabis Business Conference, and the headline says, Cannabis referendums in Slovenia deserve a serious discussion. Well, let's have one. Let's have one right now, Glenn.
Okay. Slovenia voters will decide on 2 consulting referendum measures in the June 9th pertaining to cannabis policy modernization proposals. The reference questions were approved for voter referral by Slovenia's National Assembly in April. Neither measure is binding, however. Successful votes for either will help further build upon increasing momentum for Slovenian cannabis reform. One of the consulting referendum measures involves modernizing Slovenia's medical cannabis policies. Limited medical cannabis commerce and use are already permitted in Slovenia. However, domestic production is not. Patient advocates are seeking to expand the nation's medical cannabis program to boost domestic production and safe access, increase product variety selection, improve research policies, and expand the list of Slovenia's qualifying conditions. So they don't produce any cannabis.
No.
That makes no sense. Why don't they produce it there? Instead of buying it off another country. That makes
international trade, I guess. But yeah, it's that maybe they didn't want to set up that whole system. They just wanted the medical program, made some available for some people. But like I know here in Canada, when we were doing our medical and the legalization thing, these treaties and stuff that have passed, there's something in there about having requiring medical programs. And I know at one point here in Canada that when the law was being fought back in the early 2000s, that if the judges ruled that if there was no medical program, then cannabis would be dropped from the CDSA and there would be no laws against cannabis. It required to have a medical program.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, I guess no, I've lost where we were. Okay, call it.
The second consulting referendum measure asked voters about the cultivation and possession of cannabis for limited personal use by adults. Personal cultivation, possession, and use by adults are already legal in Malta, Luxembourg, and Germany. Courts in other European countries have also issued rulings that provide similar personal cannabis consumer protections.
Exactly. Cannabis policy modernization proposals in Slovenia are important topics worthy of constructive public policy conversations. Unfortunately, cannabis opponents in Slovenia seem to prefer using delay tactics and spreading incomplete, misleading information. Yeah. An example can be found in a recent article published by Slovenia's National Institute of Public Health, in which the entity expresses opposition to cannabis use and reform in general, but does not specifically call out the upcoming referendum votes. Still, the aim of the article is glaringly obvious.
The Institute's opposition article largely relies on anti-cannabis talking points that have been recycled for decades and completely disregards very important facts and realities, which makes the Institute's position come across as disingenuous and unauthentic. The article clearly comes across as more of a political document than it does serving as an objective analysis. The authors of the article began by oversimplifying the state of Slovenia's medical cannabis program and disregarding the ineffectiveness of current medical cannabis policies in Slovenia. The article's authors are presumably mischaracterizing Slovenia's current medical cannabis policies to distract and or confuse the nation's voters, which is a common cannabis opponent tactic deployed all over the globe.
Yes, technically Slovenia's current permits limited medical cannabis use. However, domestic medical cannabis production is currently limited at best in Slovenia. Successfully obtaining effective and regulated medical cannabis products is hard for many patients, and a vast majority of the nation's suffering citizens do not qualify for legal medical cannabis access under the current policies. Medical cannabis advocates in Slovenia are seeking to implement medical cannabis policies, rules, and regulations similar to what is already in place in many other parts of the European Union. If other EU member nations can successfully expand their domestic and medical cannabis programs without significant issues, so can Slovenia. And you got to remember, Glenn, when cannabis first became legal in Canada for medical purposes, there was no source. There was no, when Terry Parker won his case, there was no source for him to
and that was partly to do because it was a court case. So the government wasn't planning on legalizing anything or doing anything. The court forced them to, so we didn't have anything to do with that.
Well, they're ahead of the ball here.
We had the same problems immediately after medical legalization here, where most people didn't qualify for it.
There was that.
There was a lot of people that didn't. Now, of course, it's legal for recreational use, so anybody can use it. But it's hard. It's very hard. The Institute article places a heavy emphasis on the harms of adolescent use, despite the fact that neither of the referendum measures proposes any change to Slovenia's cannabis policies that pertain to adolescent use or furnishing cannabis to minors. And what about the children talking point is as old as cannabis prohibition itself and is nothing more than a scare tactic. And this is used, what about the children, for everything.
Everything,
yeah. Malta, Luxembourg, and Germany now permit adults to cultivate, possess, and consume cannabis in addition to legalized medical use. And there are no reported major issues in those nations pertaining to youth consumption due to the adult use policy changes.
The same is true for other scare tactic talking points that the Institute incorporated in its article, such as passive cannabis use, which is public use around others, and driving under the influence. Neither referendum measure proposes changes to Slovenia's public cannabis use or driving under the influence laws. Both will remain prohibited. So you can't walk down the sidewalk and smoke a joint like we can here. Major macro level reality that the Institute completely disregards in its positions is that there is no proof that cannabis prohibition lowers cannabis consumption rates. Adults are consuming cannabis in Slovenia every day, just as they have done for many years. The Institute would be well served to acknowledge that reality and advocate for regulation and education instead of continuing to metaphorically stick their heads in the sand and pretend that prohibition works.
Leaders in Malta, Luxembourg, and Germany have taken the position that it is better for public health outcomes when cannabis consumers use homegrown and or regulated cannabis products versus consuming cannabis products that are sourced from criminal enterprises. Leaders in those nations have also taken the position that it's better to stop wasting precious public resources to enforce failed prohibition policies and instead use those same resources to boost fact-based education and other public programs. Imagine that, fact-based education.
Imagine that.
It's unfortunate that in 2024, cannabis opponents would still rather spread incomplete misinformation to try to maintain the failed status quo rather than have a constructive public conversation about a more sensible, modern approach to cannabis policies.
With that being said, it is up to cannabis advocates in Slovenia to educate themselves about the true facts regarding cannabis. Tell everyone that they know that the consulting referendum votes will be held on June the 9th and inform them about the objective benefits of modernizing Slovenia's cannabis policies. Slovenia does not need to reinvent the wheel. Rather, the central European nation needs to look at some of its continental peers for policy measures that are already succeeding, such as the policies found in Malta, Luxembourg, and Germany. Cannabis opponents in Slovenia largely benefited for many years from the lack of successful examples from other EU nations. Those days are now gone, and just as modernized cannabis policies are succeeding in other parts of the EU, the same will prove to be true in Slovenia once lawmakers get the country on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How about getting out of the way of medical people that need their medicine?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's just, they obviously need to step up the supply. You know, like if patients, they get the medical program, you know, what supply are they getting? Like they didn't even mention that the country was even importing any cannabis for the patients.
Yeah, but they're not allowed to grow it, so where else would it come in from?
Where's it coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I put money on it's illegal to import it, but they're doing it somehow under, I don't even know what.
Yeah. It's just, it's, you know, unfortunately for the patients, so they're the ones that usually suffer. So, alrighty, on to our next story. This comes to us from Entrepreneur. Headline says California Assembly passes bill to let cannabis cafes sell food and non-alcoholic drinks and host live music. All right. That's how we do it here.
You couldn't have food in a Coke if you went somewhere to cannabis cafe.
Correct. Exactly. You weren't allowed to supply that. But yet, as you saw during our Vapor Lounge tour, you could buy food at some of those lounges that we visited. And beverages, non-alcoholic.
And some of them were actually amazing, like the Hot Box Cafe. They had good food, good drinks. I loved that time. I think it was great, and I think that should be everywhere, even though they're not around anymore.
No. Well, cannabis became legal, so they became illegal.
Stupidity. The California State Assembly has approved legislation to let cannabis cafes serve food and non-alcoholic beverages and host events including music and other performances. The bill next moves to the Senate. We'll see what happens there. The California State Assembly has passed the bill allowing licensed cannabis cafes. Oh, I just read that one.
Yeah.
Lawmakers passed Assembly Bill 1775 on Monday with a 56-5 vote after the bill's third reading.
Good. Nice, strong vote. Yeah, nice, strong vote there. People are allowed to consume cannabis at licensed dispensaries in California, but the state does not currently allow cannabis businesses to sell other consumables such as food and beverages. The bill would require the sale and display of non-infused food and beverages to be handled separately from the cannabis sales. I don't know why they wouldn't allow food and beverages. Like, you know, what is the French fries or potato chips?
I think it's trying to keep people out of them. Because if you go there, what are you going to do? You're gonna go smoke a joint and then you got to leave because you're
socialize, socialize, and plan how to defeat these unjust laws like this one.
Yeah.
Governor Gavin,
don't get cannabis guys talking together. They might do something. You know?
Yeah. Governor Gavin Newsom last year vetoed a similar bill, citing concerns the bill would violate the state's smoke-free protections, which prohibits people from smoking in enclosed spaces while at work. But the bill's sponsor, Assembly member Matt Haney, said in the report his goal was fairness for cannabis operators who must face the combined hurdles of strict regulations and competition from the illicit market.
And I have absolutely no problem if they want to tell people who are actually smoking cannabis to step outside on the back porch. I would do it myself, no questions asked, right away. Any other form of consumption can be taken care of by filters.
And that's how the hot box operated. Is that Abby had smokers out on the back deck and vaporizing on inside.
And vaporizing with a couple of filters, you'll never have a problem. I understand the little trepidation about consuming or actually smoking cannabis indoors, but like we just said, that can be eliminated in an instant.
Yeah, that's right. It can be. Okay, go ahead.
It's really about fairness.
Yeah, it's really about fairness.
supporting businesses that follow the rules. If we keep allowing unnecessary regulations to strangle California's legal cannabis businesses, we're just encouraging illegal drug sales and all of the problems that come with that.
The bill still has to pass the Senate before reaching the governor's desk. So come on, governor. Because, yeah, it just doesn't make sense. You got to have beverages, and I'm sure you have. You know, I like to see infused infused foods and beverages as being available in a lounge. But
we actually went to a comedy club. That was awesome, and we got to watch entertainment. I believe I even had a beer there, right? And
I can't remember what beer.
I think I had a beer there. I'm pretty sure. I know it was quite a few years ago now, but it was great to have the entertainment right there, you know. And we could eat something, you could drink something, you could consume cannabis. It was awesome.
It was in the back room, and it felt like a rec room.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the Underground Comedy Club, which is no more, but the comedy continues, just in a whole new. Actually, there's a comedy event that this coming weekend, I believe, that Puff Mama's putting on. It's at a cannabis store, Spirit Leaf. It's at a cannabis Spirit Leaf store, and it must be out back. I'm not sure where
That's
it's
great.
being held at. Yeah. So, alrighty, on to our next story. We haven't got a lot of time here, so we'll get this next one or two in. This one here, I'm surprised you didn't know about, Glenn, but it comes from StratCan. Headline there says new authority for inspectors in New Brunswick to deal with more than 100 illegal cannabis stores.
New Brunswick recently passed new legislation to give provincial inspectors more authority to target a growing number of illegal cannabis stores. Bill 29, an act respecting Cannabis Control Act, passed a third reading on May 15th and gives inspectors more authority and increases fines for those operating illegal cannabis stores, as well as their landlords. And that's where they're going to get them, with the landlords.
Well, that's what's happening in other provinces as well, as they've gone after the landlords. The legislation was also debated by the Standing Committee of Economic Policy, where several questions were raised by Robert McKee, MLA for Moncton Centre, and Kevin Arsenault from Kent North, fielded by Bruce Fitch, the bill sponsor. According to Fitch, as of April the 1st, 2024, 107 illegal stores are operating in the province. Of those, 74 are operating in First Nations communities.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Not one of those 74 are illegally operating at all. They're completely on territory owned by First Nations. The government has nothing to do with it, and they're not illegal. Those 74 are illegal, so the rest might be illegal, but those 74 are perfectly legal, and there's nothing they can do.
I'll finish the paragraph, and I think you'll agree with it. Provincial representatives in the past repeatedly said they do not have the authority to enforce their cannabis regulations on First Nation reserved lands, and this legislation is not expected to change that.
I don't think the legislation can change that.
Well,
they have no right to change that. It's a Canadian law. It's not a New Brunswick law.
It's in British Columbia. As you weren't with Cindy and I, they raided the reserves again out in British Columbia because the province believes that their law covers all people, and they raided them for a second time.
As far as I'm concerned, that land is their land. The government has no right to go on that land. We're not talking about a murder here. We're not talking about armed robberies here.
Yeah.
We're talking about cannabis. They have the right 100% to do whatever the hell they want on their own land. Period.
Now, I don't know if BC if their law has been challenged in the higher courts, but I do know that they look at it as their law covers even the First Nations.
I can't wait for the court cases to go through.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go. During the debate of the bill in the committee, Fitch did not directly respond to several questions from both McKee and Arsenault about how this new legislation would apply to First Nations affiliated stores, or about the current provincial government's stance on these types of stores, instead making reference to the complexity of the issue, often referring to provincial and federal jurisdictions, and explaining the difference between provincial and federal rules. This mirrors similar statements made by the RCMP. The legislation increases penalties to $5,000 if you operate a store, $2,000 if you are selling illegal cannabis but not necessarily operating a store, and $5,000 for a landlord who knowingly allows such an operation on their property. They're going to shut them down with the landlords instantly.
Landlords. Law enforcement in New Brunswick has raided several unlicensed cannabis stores in recent months, with one recent raid in April, 2 in March, and 2 more arrests and products seized from an unlicensed dispensary in St. John's in January. A court recently issued a $20,000 fine following a raid in 2022, while charges against 2 men connected to the company have been withdrawn.
There are 25 Cannabis New Brunswick stores in the province, plus a handful of licensed privately run cannabis stores. And the New Brunswick cannabis stores suck. They're terrible. You can't see the product. You can't smell the product. You basically buy something in a tube or in a container that you can't see what you're buying.
Yeah.
And in my experience, almost all of it's garbage.
Well, you told me a story. You told me a story that happened last week.
Yeah. Before I went to Ontario, I bought 2 tubes with 3 joints in each tube. The tubes are, I'm going to say, about 6 inches long, somewhere around there, 6 or 7 inches. That's it. I got the same tube. I got to a hotel room in Quebec. I was stopped for the night. So I decided I'm going to smoke a joint. I went out in the parking lot. I opened up the tube, and I had 3 joints in it, about, I'm going to say, probably an inch of cannabis in each joint. And I paid $30 for 6 of these joints, which are the equivalent to probably 3, or no, maybe less than 3. And I went to Ontario. I purchased 4 full-size joints for $18. And the cannabis, there was absolutely no comparison between the two. The stuff I got from New Brunswick was absolute junk. And as you said, I smoked 3 joints that night. I wouldn't do that, right? So the system we have now is better than what we had, obviously, when we grew up, but it needs a lot of work still.
How much cannabis was, or what kind of cannabis was in those really small joints?
This is the other thing. You don't know. There's a name on the side of the tube, right? It says blueberry whatever, right? But that means absolutely nothing, because everybody's blueberry whatever is different than the other guy's blueberry whatever, you know? So if you can't smell it and you can't see it, don't buy it. That's the rule. You go to the First Nation stores, you can see what you're buying, you can smell what you're buying. You're not allowed to touch it, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But to see and smell something, at least you have an idea what you're consuming. To buy something in a frickin' container where you can't see or smell it is stupidity, you know. And we don't have much choice here.
Because then you drive several hours, and then later you find out that where's the other half of my joints?
Yeah. I was at least 7 hours away from where I live. You know.
Oh wow. Okay. I see it's the top of the hour, but I want to get into this next story, and then we'll shut her down. But here we go. This is from MJ Biz Daily, and the headline on it that says that clock starts today as DEA publishes cannabis rescheduling proposal.
The appearance of the Federal Register of Cannabis' proposal shift to a Schedule 3 controlled substance from a Schedule 1, the most significant shift in national cannabis law since 1970. Also launches a 62-day public comment period, one of the required steps in the formal federal rulemaking process. The Department of Justice will accept comments from the public until July 22, according to Tuesday's notice.
Through June 20th, the DOJ will entertain requests for public hearings before an administrative law judge, according to Tuesday's notice. If the DA administrative Ann Milgram elects to hold such a hearing, further notice will appear in the Federal Registry.
Tuesday's notice does not indicate how long the DOJ and DEA might ponder the public comments before issuing the final rule. Observers of the federal rulemaking process have speculated that a final rescheduling rule could appear as soon as September or October.
The ongoing process began in October 22 when the President, Joe Biden, issued an executive order directing cabinet-level agencies to expeditiously review the failed policy of classifying cannabis as more dangerous than fentanyl. In August of 2023, after considering information, including data about medical cannabis use submitted by states with legal cannabis programs, the Department of Health and Human Services found that cannabis has currently accepted use and recommended it be reclassified as a Schedule III drug.
The category includes drugs such as anabolic steroids, ketamine, and Tylenol with codeine. Such drugs are available legally only with a prescription, which raises questions about how the federal government might regulate the $36 billion state legal cannabis industry. I bought Tylenol with codeine at a gas station down there, so I don't know what they're talking about. I bought it more than once down there at a gas station.
And you didn't need a prescription?
No, it's right there, just sitting there on one of those little cards. That was it.
Oh, well, minors can go in and buy a beverage that gives them wings.
Yeah, they can.
Let's see. If the transfer to Schedule III is finalized, the regulatory controls applicable to Schedule III controlled substances would apply as appropriate, along with existing cannabis-specific requirements and any additional controls that might be implemented, including those that might be implemented to meet U.S. treaty obligations, the DEA wrote in its notice on Tuesday. However, Schedule III drugs are not subject to Internal Revenue Service Code Section 208E. Oh, I thought they were, which forbids plant-based or plant-touching cannabis businesses from taking certain deductions on their federal tax returns.
What's plant-touching cannabis businesses? What does that mean?
What? Well, what it is like in the earlier article, it said something about it'll make some differences in the tax thing. And some people have been, in some of the stuff I have been reading, they've been saying that the Schedule III will allow for this 208E, which is allows them to make deductions in their federal tax returns. You know, just like any other business deduction, they want to be able to to allow cannabis businesses to do deductions and when they're filing their income tax.
Yeah, and if they don't allow your business to do that, remove all those deductions from every other business.
Well, that's the thing, because cannabis is illegal federally.
Other sought-after reforms, such as cannabis banking protections or allowances for plant-touching businesses to list on U.S.-based major stock exchanges, would require actions from Congress.
Yeah. See, it says plant-touching businesses. Those are the people that grow it.
Plant-touching businesses. That's a weird way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah. But, as that first article, the earlier article, it pointed out a lot of the stuff that was bad to go to Schedule III. There is the benefit of the research, which is very important. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
But it needs more than that.
Oh, definitely. I can see this is a step along the way. That's what it is. It's a step that's taken decades. If
all they do is classify it as a number 3 to do the research, stuff like that, let's hope it's not another 50 years before they reclassify it again.
I'll never know.
Neither will I. Neither will I. Maybe hopefully we're both alive to see it happen in the U.S. We did have one more story to cover, but we are getting a little long in the tooth, and that happened to do with teen use of cannabis, and it talked about psychotic disorders are on the rise with the kids, and it mentions that the people that are over 30, there's no increase there. Who knows? The cannabis that you're buying at the store, especially edibles, isn't very strong.
Yeah.
All right, and maybe they're already predisposed.
I think that's the major part of it. They're predisposed to that, and maybe it helps them along a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe their parents were predisposed, because we've always said that predisposed situations, people, it's connected to the cannabis end, and now those people are having kids, right? So
yep.
All righty. Other than that, we're done. From the legacy420.com news desk, that's the news for today. If you found it educational and informative, please share it with others. Thanks to legacy420.com, Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, and Limestone City Hydroponics.ca, and to our viewers. And don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Peace.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20 is so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420 enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.